I give the call to the honourable member for Fadden.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Defence delivers youth development in a military setting for young Australians aged between 12.5 and 20 years, ostensibly through the Australian Navy Cadets, Australian Army Cadets and Australian Air Force Cadets. The cadet organisation operates in partnership with Defence and Community. In June 2008, there were approximately 22,000 cadets and 2,287 cadet staff in 455 units across Australia. The cadets provide a fun, challenging and safe youth development program conducted in a contemporary ADF environment and based on defence customs, traditions and values. Cadets provide leadership, team building and life skills and certainly foster an interest in the wider Australian Defence Force. The Coalition supports the Australian Defence Force capability as a youth development organisation in a military environment. We believe the most important people in the cadet construct are the cadets themselves. For the ADF, sponsorship of cadets is a superb way of giving young people an opportunity to gain an understanding of the Defence Force, its place within society and service career options available. Cadets comprise less than 1% of the general population age cohort, but about 17% of ADF enlistments, and not unsurprisingly, I was both a cadet and someone who enlisted in the Defence Force. They contribute 35 to 40% of the intake to the Australian Defence Force Academy. Unsurprisingly, I was one of those in the Academy. More than half of our 1-stars, i.e. brigadiers, commodores, air commodore equivalents and above, are previous cadets. Although the ADFC does not exist as a recruiting tool for defence, it is impossible to ignore the significant contribution the cadet program makes to ADF enlistment, both in terms of quantity and quality. An increase in ADFC recruiting would undeniably result in increased ADF enlistment. The Australian Defence Force Cadets is run by 3 separate organisations, administered by the respective service chiefs under a range of independent acts: Defence Act, Navy Defence Act, Air Force Act and Cadet Force Regulations 1977. Each organisation has a headquarter structure in Canberra, regional headquarters around the country and many cadet units and parade locations. Administrative staff include full-time and part-time members of the APS, the ADF and Defence Reserve personnel. Cadet staff are adult members of the community appointed under Cadet Force Regulations as officers or instructors of cadets. They are generally paid an allowance. Recent changes have seen various of these officers employed against newly created APS positions, effectively seeing the emergence of a full-time cadet staff, and that is certainly supported. School-based cadet units are generally restricted to drawing their cadet membership from the students of the parents or affiliated schools. There are approximately 46 school-based units, 42 Army, 2 Navy and 2 in the Air Force. Not unsurprisingly, I came from a school-based cadet unit at the Rockhampton Grammar School. In the majority of these units, the cadet program is conducted as an integral component of the school's curricular activities. School-based units draw most of their adult staff from the school staff, and these units generally receive support from the school, as well as logistics support, including the provision of some equipment and stores. In my own experience at the Rockhampton Grammar School, we had a school sergeant who was also the lieutenant in the cadet unit, a man called Jim Giedricht, who had fought in every combat operation since World War II, through the Malayan emergency, through confrontation, through Korea with the 3rd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, and then, of course, with the Australian Army Training Team in Vietnam, and then wider combat operations in Vietnam. He was, at the time, one of the most heavily decorated Australians currently serving either in the Permanent Reserve or Cadet Force. Community-based cadet units membership is open to any eligible member of the local community, and the parade location may be in a range of facilities, including defence facilities, community halls or local schools. The adult staff are either parents of cadets, interested members of the local community or current or former ADF members. Most of these units receive some type of support or sponsorship from their local community or from parent support group committees or indeed from the ADF. In recognising the benefits of youth development in partnership with the community and pathways to ADF recruitment, the Coalition remains absolutely and utterly 100% committed to maintaining a vibrant cadet organisation. Cadet programs will continue to be strongly aligned with their sponsoring service, and the Coalition will further strengthen and fund this relationship. In terms of policy history, the Australian Defence Force cadets have a long and proud history in Australia and can trace their origins back to pre-Federation Australia. Indeed, from its beginnings at St Mark's Collegiate School in 1866, The cadet movement continued to grow and evolve through the years until hitting its infamous low point in the early 1970s, surprise, surprise, under a Labor government. During this time, the government was under increasing pressure to withdraw Australian troops from Vietnam. There was a growing feeling of hostility towards defence, especially from the Labor government. The newly elected Whitlam government promised to review the Defence Forces, including the Cadet Corps. The subsequent report, prepared by Dr T.B. Miller into the Australian Cadets, recommended the retention of cadets with some modifications, noting that the scheme attracted broad community support. However, in typical Labor Whitlam-esque fashion, as we continue to see today, the government decided to abolish school cadets. So is the government's historical view of the value of cadet-based youth or cadet-based work in youth development. The government's general scaling back of the Defence Force as a whole included the withdrawal of their support for cadet units. All Army, Navy and Air Force cadet units were either disbanded or continued without support from the Commonwealth. This decision generated a fair degree of angry unrest, may I simply say, in large sections of the cadet and wider community, but its abolition was appealed without success. In 1976, cadets were re-established under the renewed coalition government under Fraser after the disaster of the Whitlam-esque years, and the Australian Services Cadet Scheme continued on a different basis. Community-based rather than school-based units were encouraged, together with a downscaling of military-like training. The community-based emphasis was crystallised in 1983 when the Hawke Labor government announced that school-based units would no longer receive direct support from the Army, many of these units subsequently becoming limited support units. Another Labor administration, another disaster for the military. On its election in 1996, the Howard government initiated the Cadets in School program and in mid-1998 moved to re-establish full support status to units which had previously suffered neglectful indifference from multiple Labor administrations. And if I could simply say to the members of it, may this be the last dreadful Labor administration that cuts funding to school-based cadets. In the 2007-8 budget, the Coalition provided an additional $100 million across 10 years to enhance and expand the cadet program. The government, in typical Labor-esque style, not content with over 140 reviews and commissions and inquiries and investigations, actually instigated an investigation into the cadet scheme, the Hinckley Report. It was the 27th review, study or project into the ADFC scheme since the early years. Another review from a Labor government, which begs the question, whatever happened to the review of the 1,000 best and brightest that descended upon Canberra? Whatever happened to the recommendations and the outcomes of those?
They've lost the butcher paper.
All that butcher's paper across the room, all of those pens, all those great ideas. Did we ever see any of those great ideas? Did any of them ever come to fruition? I wonder what actually happened to the greatest minds that Labor had assembled as they gave a standing ovation to then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. Oh, that's right. You sacked him, didn't you? So here we have the Hinckley Review. And that has led, of course, to the Defence Legislation Amendment 2001 bill. This bill is non-controversial as it relates to administration of the school cadet program, which is the first Labor administration since Curtin that hasn't sought to destroy the cadet units as soon as they came to power. So congratulations, Labor, for the first time in 50 years you haven't conditionally gone and buggered up something that was particularly good. Because this bill only makes administrative changes. You actually listened to advice for once when it came to cadets, because your history through previous Labor administrations has been deplorable, moribund and disgraceful, to even be polite. These administrative changes will actually change a range of acts to provide that the service chiefs' day-to-day administrative responsibility for their respective service cadets is subject to the direction of the Minister or indeed the CDF. These will ensure that the amendments will allow the CDF to have a delegation-making power, ostensibly down to the VCDF, in relation to cadet responsibility and direction. The bill amends 3 existing pieces of legislation, the Air Force Act, Defence Act and Naval Defence Act, that currently provide the framework for the administration of the school cadet program. The bill is non-contentious. It has no financial impact in terms of expenditure or direction, and thankfully and wondrously, After 50 years, a Labor administration, for the first time ever, finally has decided not to harm the Defence Cadets, has finally decided not to seek to destroy, remove funding, take out of community support, take away from schools. Finally, you've learnt the lesson after 50 years when it comes to the Defence Force Cadets: do no harm. May I suggest you take that lesson to the disgraceful series of bills, especially your carbon tax that you put into the parliament yesterday, and you adopt that process once more of do no harm, because right now the harm you are seeking to do will enact vengeance at the ballot box, I guarantee you.